Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win, or you find a way to lose. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Leave that donation for that fried rice and chicken wings. Hey, look, man, why are fighters making it so hard on themselves when they have the opportunity to fight the projected pound for pound king of boxing, the future face of the sport? Are they afraid of Jaron Ennis? We know Spence and Ennis aren't fighting. We know Crawford's doing something different. Virgil Ortiz doing something different. So for Jaron Boots Ennis, he's not going to get those fights, people. So forget about it. Even me, I'm sitting here talking about for Jaron to get some kind of credit. Hell, even Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter. The names alone carry weight, even though they're not what they were years ago. But those names carry some weight. But when you take a look at it, right, for the fights that are feasible, Montes Stanley Eunice. Even though Stanley Eunice is saying, I wouldn't go and fight Jaron Boots Ennis in Philadelphia. Isn't this called prize fighting? Supposed to be fighting for a prize, fighting for money, right? See, this is what I just don't understand. Stanley Eunice doesn't have a goddamn thing going on with his career right now. But he chooses to be loyal to PBC. I've always said this, and I'll continue to say it. I truly believe that Al Heyman, he structured his pay model for himself and his fighters a kind of way to his fighters made some serious, they make serious dough in their fights. And some of those guys who have been inactive for a while are okay because they made so much money. It probably they probably made the kind of money that had they been on another platform without their own promotional outfits, they probably made the kind of money that it would have taken them to if they were still fighting 2 or 3 times a year. That's just the kind of money they probably made over the last few years, to where they can sit back here and not do nothing for the next 5, 6, 7 years. That's why I don't think anyone complains. Now, when you listen to how Brian Norman Sr. broke down Brian Norman Jr.'s paydays and the fees he has to pay, shit's pretty eye-opening. But I'm starting to think some of these guys are a little bit scared of Jaron Boots Ennis. It's okay to lose. And for me, right, if I'm going to fight somebody, the best fighter doesn't always win. It's the boxer who fights the best. There's always a chance that any of these guys at 147, Stanley Eunice, Barrios, Brian Norman Jr., the champions, right, they got a chance to beat Ennis. 2 men in the ring, each of them with a set of fists and a brain. And they got to go in there, and the best man's going to win. But I'll be honest with you, I would rather fight Jaron Boots Ennis, put my title on the line, make real good money, and lose to him than fight, I think, a qualified but lesser opponent, make much less money, and then end up losing to that guy. Now, I understand some people out here are they're like, you know what, I'm going to take a lesser risk, get a reward, but it's not going to be the reward had I fought Boots, because I don't want to take on such a grand risk. and facing someone like Jaron. But maybe what Brian Norman Sr. was saying about, instead of fighting Boots for the one fight, deal with all the tax issues and all the fees he has to pay and not bring home the kind of money he wants this is what I took from it, in a high-risk fight. Because that's what this shit boils down to. Sitting back digesting what Brian Norman Sr. was saying, he knows that's a high-risk fight. He'd rather come down and fight 4 or 5 times against much lesser opposition, make a couple $100,000 here and there, and over them 4 or 5 fights where he's really facing non-threatening opponents, be in a lower tax bracket, and by the 5th fight would have made $1 million anyway. Now you see, I like to sit back and let people talk. Listen a whole lot, talk very little on my end, right? And I think this is what this shit is boiling down to. I think these guys are afraid of Jaron Boots Ennis. And what I mean by afraid, they're afraid of losing they're afraid of taking a loss. They can say what they want about Boots. He doesn't hit hard. Every opponent he fought was tailor-made for him to make him look good. They can say what they want. Okay? But one thing they don't say is Jaron Boots Ennis can't fight. Even when they try to go down that rabbit hole, they seem to catch themselves and say, well, Boots is a great fighter. He's a great fighter. They may try to say he don't have no power and he ain't no bully and he's no threat and he's no boogeyman. They'll start puffing up their chests. And they'll start whistling goddamn Dixie. But at some point, they stop and they collect themselves and they make a little change to their tune. Because they know Jaron Boots Ennis is he's the real deal. Now, is he Terrence Crawford real deal? I don't know. Is he what Earl Spence was real deal? The Danny Garcias, the Manny Pacquiao, the Floyd Mayweather real deals. I mean, we don't know yet. With Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, but we're going to find out. But for Jaron Boots Ennis, I just think it's crazy, right? Because I do understand when you have a guy like Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn's looking out for himself and for his fighter. And Eddie Hearn's a fast talker. So maybe there is a chance that Eddie Hearn said, you know what, I'm going to... Actually, that shit don't even make sense. Because I'm sitting here, right? Goddamn yawning. I'm sitting here trying to understand Eddie Hearn. To suggest that he never wanted Jaron Boots Ennis to fight Brian Norman Jr. Eddie Hearn just playing the game. Let me tell you something. If Brian Norman Jr. and his team would have accepted the $1.75 million, Brian Norman Jr. would be fighting Jaron Ennis. So I'm not buying this. Eddie Hearn never wanted to fight. What it is Jaron Boots Ennis and his pops. Brian Norman, dad and his whole team, they never wanted to fight Jaron unless they were going to get the kind of money that would really change their lives. That's what that shit boiled down to. Because they know that it's a risk. So they're like, if we're going to get in here and we're going to face somebody like him, we want to make the kind of money to where we don't need to worry about nothing. And that's why they said they want him to come home with $1 million, like $1.2 million. It's crazy. Let me tell you something. They're putting duck sauce on the fried rice. I sit here, man, and I do a lot of videos, and the more I sit back and think about something, I may change my view on things. But I do think these guys are putting duck sauce on the fried rice. I do. I think Barrios would fight Boots. I know he had a daughter, but at the same time, Barrios is looking out for his career. He doesn't want to get in a situation where he ends up losing. If he struggled somewhat against Fabian Maidana. If he struggled against him, he's going to struggle against Boots. You better believe that. And Montestano Yunus, he out here, he didn't look that great in his last fight. He's a sitting duck. Jaron Boots Ennis, I think, tranquilizes him, picks him apart. Then you got Brian Norman Jr., who I think is a solid, very impressed with what he did against Santillan, a fight he wasn't supposed to win. I didn't have him win that fight. Then he came and stopped him. But when I look at it, and I just be real, right, I do think these dudes are worried about Jaron Boots Ennis. They can say what they want. And Eddie Hearn, I think, is realizing he's going to have an extremely tough time getting Jaron Boots Ennis to undisputed at 147, unless he wants to pay these fighters money that he feels they don't deserve. Now, let me break something down to you. You know, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, I'm sure they have a budget. And I'm sure they're like, okay, just like Brian Norman's team, they want to make sure Brian Norman takes home a certain amount of money. I'm sure Eddie Hearn's like, okay, well, this is what I want for you to make boots. This is what I think, this is what I want for my company to make. And this thing about Brian Norman Jr. and boots, I'm sure Karen Chikadzian was going to get some step-aside money. And I think Eddie Hearn was going to use this event and the proceeds from the event to pay Boots, pay Brian Norman Jr., pay Matchroom, and pay Chikadzian. And I think that's why Eddie Hearn wasn't willing to go further than $1.75 million with Brian Norman's team, because Chikadzian probably cost a pretty penny to get him to move out the way. But now it seems like that ship has sailed and Boots could be fighting Chikadzian, which I just think is horrible. But anyway, y'all can think what you want, but I think Brian Norman's team, I think they misstepped. I do. But I understand people say, well, if Brian Norman comes and he fights and he wins, okay, he gotta win. Now he should easily walk in and get the $2 million he wants. I don't think it works that way. I don't think it works that way. Because when I look at this right here, right? Let me look at something. Okay. Because Brian Norman Jr. is fighting, here we go. All right, check this out. This is Brian Norman Jr. right here underneath the WBO column. He's not fighting Giasov, his mandatory. He's not fighting Rocha, who's ranked number 2, Sasaki 3, Sissoko, Chikadzian, David Papat. He's fighting Cuevas, ranked number 7, 27-1-1, right? That's who Brian Norman Jr. is fighting. Who the hell is Cuevas? Now, maybe some of y'all follow boxing a little bit more than me, but I don't think a win over a guy named Derek Cuevas is going to help the profile of Brian Norman Jr. I think had he fought, which we know, like Karen Chikadzian, right? Because Chikadzian fought Boots. I think that kind of fight would do amazing things for Norman Jr., especially if he gets in there and knocks him out within 4 rounds or something like that. But that's not what's happening, because unfortunately Chikadzian's a mandatory to Boots. I don't know. But if he went that route, then I think, you know what, that would help his position as far as when he's sitting at the negotiation table saying, hey, I want this. I fought Chikadzian. Boots fought Chikadzian. I knocked Chikadzian out in 4 rounds. Boots couldn't even knock him out. See, then he has some teeth to his demands and his argument for more money. But right now, clipping Derek Cuevas. I think it does nothing for him. Anyway, when I take a look at it, I just think these guys are afraid of Boots. And if they're saying Boots is hittable, if they're saying Boots is not fundamentally sound, if they're saying Boots don't have the one-hitter quitter type power, if they're saying all these things about Boots, he's had guys spoon-fed to him. He's never faced somebody who will fight him back, right? Okay. If they're going to say all these things about Boots, cool. So fight him. Go fight him. And etch out a position amongst all these elite fighters at 147. Even if you lose the Boots, if you get in there and represent yourself well, that's going to get you another big fight. Even if you lose. But if you get in there and you clip him, well, then you're the man. Who knows what a win over Boots could do for someone's career. Especially when you start talking about these guys, like the Crawfords and those guys. But really, at 147, if he clips Boots, Boots falls to the back of the line. And then now he's unified. Whoever beats Boots, they can go on and see about picking up the other guys. And I think Stanionis, Barrios, Brian Norman Jr., I think they would fight each other before they would fight Boots. I really do. Anyway, if you ask me, I think these guys are a little bit worried about Jaron Boots Ennis. I really do. I think they're worried about him. Let's see how it all plays out, because Terrence Crawford seems to be struggling to get some opponents in the fights he wants. And Jaron Boots Ennis seems to be in the same boat. It could just be, science, the energy and shit, pushing Boots and Crawford towards each other. But let's see what happens. But I do think some of these fighters are afraid of Boots. They know there's a good chance of them losing, and they want that. They want that money for that fried rice and chicken wings. Y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.